Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. It's Grace, and the video that I am going to be doing today is going to be a spoiler talk for The Fires of Heaven, which is the 5th book in the Wheel of Time. Now, as you'll know if you've been around my channel for a little bit, when I did my spoiler talk for The Shadow Rising, I had to split it into 2 parts. So we're gonna make our best effort. I'm going to make my best effort to be concise, and we're going to see how that goes because it's not one of my strong suits, but I have my handy dandy notepad that we're going to consult if it seems like I'm getting off track. So without further ado, I'm just going to get right into talking about the book. The Fires of Heaven by Robert Jordan I have in my beloved floppy paperback format because I love these books. Look, the reading experience is just unmatched. I just love it. So we have The Fires of Heaven, and I gave this book 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. I didn't enjoy it quite as much as The Shadow Rising, the previous book, but I still loved it. I still thought that it was quality. So 4 stars for this one. And my biggest complaint was that we didn't get any Perrin. And Perrin is my favorite character, and I've mentioned this before, especially in my mid-year book freakout tag, but we didn't get any of him, and I understand why. I don't think that his storyline really fit. We did see passing glances of his presence when, like, the girls are in, Teleranriad, the world of dreams. We see the 2 rivers, we see his wolf banner, things like that, but Perrin himself doesn't actually make an appearance, which just makes me sad, despite the logic of this book being full enough of content that we didn't necessarily need his storyline. Now that we've talked about my favorite character that's not in the book, let's talk about what actually did happen in the book. Okay, so the first storyline that I want to talk about is the main storyline, because that is what's going on with Rand, because he is obviously, the Dragon Reborn, the chosen one, our main character, even though there are multiple main characters. So at the start of the book, we have a large subset of our characters in the Aiel Waste in Ruadine, but then they find out that the Shadow Aiel have attacked Cairhien, or at least they are on their way over the spine of the world, and they have intention to cause chaos, and nobody wants there to be another Aiel war. So we do see Rand deciding with the chiefs of the Aiel clans that what they're going to have to do is follow the Shadow and try and prevent whatever it is that they have planned from happening on the main part of the continent. And so we see them set off. There is a lot of travel happening. We see them pass some towns on this side of the spine of the world in the Aiel Waste, and then just on the other side as well, where they've been absolutely destroyed. The Shadow Aiel have clearly been very violent, heads on pikes, people hanging from the walls, things like that is what they've left in their wake. And so basically we know that they're trouble, and we know that Rand and the Aiel need to continue this pursuit. And then they do finally find them amassing outside the walls of Cairhien, which essentially at the time when they find them is a siege because they have not breached the city. But Rand comes with his forces and basically makes a plan of war to take back Cairhien from the Shadow Aiel. So there are a couple of things that I find really interesting that happened during this part of the storyline. And the first one is how much closer Rand and Avianda become in this book. And it seems sort of begrudging on her part, because we know, based on the fact that Rand is Ta'veren and the effect that he has had on Min, that the women that fall in love with him don't necessarily do so logically, and they don't even necessarily want to, because Avianda wants to be taking care of Rand for Elaine, and she finds herself around him too much and he affects her. And so I really like Avianda. I love her personality and her spirit. And I did like her journey with coming to terms with the fact that, like, she probably is in love with Rand, even if she doesn't want to be. And when they went through that doorway into the, like, winter landscape that's actually on the other side of the Erith Ocean where the Shan-Chan are, I thought that it was really telling how quickly Rand went after her and saved her life, and that was really, like, a turning point in their relationship, in my opinion. Well, it was obviously a turning point since they, like, slept together after that happened. But I liked the way that that was done because it had a purpose in the story as well. It doubled as seeing what the Shan-Chan are up to and giving us a bit of a window, no pun intended, into that. So I was really happy with the dual purpose of that scene because I thought it was just really compelling. The other thing that I thought was really interesting when we're following this travel storyline with the Aiel on their way to Cairhien is just learning more about the Maidens and Aiel customs in general, because the Maidens are obviously like a society of fierce warriors. They have their own customs and they're really cool, but it's really interesting that they can become those servants as well if they don't think that they've served properly. Like when a couple of them failed to protect Rand in battle because they were elsewhere, and they just like give up their spears and go to be like Gaishane. Oh my gosh, I'm totally saying that wrong. For a year because they had failed him in that one instance. And it's just really interesting because, like, it just seems to be at odds with what they believe in warriors, but it has to do with their Aiel customs, and that overrides it. And it's really interesting to follow and learn about. Other thing, and probably the main one with that Battle of Cairhien and Siege of Cairhien, is Mat and what's up with him, because I love seeing that he has all of this old knowledge and it just pops out without him even realizing it at some times, and people are looking at him sideways because this, I guess, like 20-year-old man should not know all of this battle knowledge essentially and how to strategize, and like he sets up the battle for Cairhien in the same way in like 5 minutes as the Aiel clan chiefs did after all of their planning. And he just looks at the landscape and the armies and says, like, this is what's going to happen. This is what we should do. And Lan is looking at him like, bro, what? But obviously it's a trick by Lan and Rand to try and bring out some of Mat's knowledge. Also a sucker for the like reluctant hero. And so the fact that Mat wanted to leave, but as he's leaving, he sees that some of the Tyrants and some of the Cairhenians are about to walk into an Aiel trap set by the Shido Aiel, and he just can't leave them. He has to go strategize with them, and then ends up winning a bunch of battles and killing Coladin. It just gets me, I don't know, I find it so entertaining and I just love to follow it. Like, it gets me right here. That is one of those things where Mat is like, I'm no bloody hero, even though he like is though, but he doesn't want to be acknowledged as such. And even as he's going to help, he's like, why am I doing this? I just love it. It's so entertaining. So yeah, Mat continues to grow on me very much. I'm interested in his storyline. I really like following him. Once Cairhien has been taken back, we get to the point where Rand is scheming about how to go after some of the Forsaken, and what he's trying to do is facilitate a situation where he's going to go after Ravin, since he finds out about Morghase's supposed death, and he wants to avenge Elaine's mother. And he's trying to figure out a way where he can do this, but they won't see it coming. And then we get that morning down at the docks where Moraine has orchestrated this situation where she knows that Lanfear is going to make an attempt to kill Avianda because she finds out that Avianda has slept with Rand, or lose Theron Telamon because, reborn. But Moraine knows because that is a piece of the future that she saw when she was in Ruidine. And I thought it was so cool to see that come full circle, because she was willing to sacrifice herself because, well, I guess it's a question of how much she actually knew, but she knew that Rand wasn't going to be willing to kill Lanfear no matter what. No matter how hard he tried, he just couldn't do it. And that broke my heart, seeing Moraine sacrifice herself to pull Lanfear through the ter'angreal, and they're both obviously presumed dead, and I don't know how to feel about it. I'm of two minds, because I don't like when something like that is just undone for no reason, because it undoes the stakes as well. Like, if Moraine is dead, she should stay dead. But when they go through the ter'angreal, you would suppose that they're in that other world, and the destroying of the ter'angreal doesn't necessarily mean that the other world is destroyed. It just means that the portal to the other world is destroyed. So I can see an avenue to her actually not being dead. I'm just not sure, because I thought Moraine was going to be in it for the long haul. I don't want her to be dead, but if she's not, and she's there with Lanfear, she's obviously in a lot of trouble. And I don't know. That's just speculation. I could see somewhere down the road there being a thread to bring them both back. Because I thought that Lanfear was going to be in it for the long haul too. She seems to like scheming and pulling the strings on a lot of things. So, I don't know. We'll see where that goes. But it did break my heart a little bit. And I loved her all the more to see her do that and sacrifice herself. And after that happens, Rand knows that he has to go after Raven. And so he goes to Camlin basically immediately with very little delay to go after Raven. But Raven knows that he's coming after him. So he has laid a trap with Trollocs and Fades that come out of the palace, and he's ready for Rand. So they end up having their battle in the world of dreams, which again is Tel'aran'rhiod. I'm probably butchering it, but I'm doing my best. And it was really interesting to learn more, because they're not there in the same way that Nynaeve and Elaine are there, because Nynaeve and Elaine go there when they're asleep. These guys are there when they're awake, and Rand and Raven are playing a game of cat and mouse and trying to attack each other. But then finally, Rand ends up killing Raven with balefire, and he has Nynaeve's help, but we'll get to that a little bit more when we talk about her storyline. But they end up killing Raven with balefire, and balefire is just so fascinating because it is explained to us how it undoes threads of the pattern, but the blast was so strong that it undid the deaths of Avianda, Mat, and Asmodine, because Raven had done those things, and now they're undone. And that opens up a lot of possibilities for things that can be done with that. So I didn't mind. Well, I didn't want any of those characters to die, except for Asmodine. I don't care whether he dies. But I obviously didn't want Mat or Avianda to die, so I'm okay with it. But this is in the same vein as what I said about Moraine, where there has to be stakes. So I don't want that to be used too many times going forward, but I do think that it's a really cool thing. And I liked that we saw how powerful it can be. And so, yeah, I'm interested in that going forward as well. So Rand obviously has the main storyline, but the secondary storyline in this one was Nynaeve and Elaine. And so we pick up after they have done their thing in Tanchico from the previous book, and they're basically cross-country traveling, attempting to escape the chaos that has been left behind them in that city. And they spend a while on the road with Tom and Juilin. I was saying Julian in the last video, and that's not right. But anyway, they spend a while on the road, and I liked their storyline, but near the beginning of the book, I had a lot of like WTF moments with their storyline because I was just baffled by what was going on with Elaine and Tom. I said in the previous book that I was excited to figure out what was going to happen and what the dynamic would be between them when Elaine found out that Tom was her old, like, her mother's old lover. So he was kind of around when she was a kid, and I thought that that would be interesting. But then in this book, we see Elaine, like, flirting with Tom and trying to be romantic with him, trying to, like, ensnare him, and I just thought it was strange. And then we have a passage from Nynaeve. Nynaeve, in her head, is thinking to herself about how when a woman comes of age, the person that she compares herself to is her mother. And I'm kind of like, where's she going with this? And she talks about how you'll compare yourself to your mother in terms of like sewing or the skills that you've acquired. And stuff like that I could see, because you usually probably feel like your mother knows better than you about a lot of things, and it's usually true. But then she goes on to say that you'll compare yourself to your mother in terms of like romance and love, and a lot of times this can lead to casual flirting with your father. And I just had to stop and be like, did I just read that properly? And then read it again, and it turns out that I did read it properly. And I have some mixed feelings about Nynaeve, but this just made me stop and be like, has Robert Jordan ever met a woman before? I've never met a woman who has considered flirting with her father as normal behavior, and I've never heard anything like that proposed either. I did not know what to think, and thankfully, they seemed to get over that. Like, that storyline was kind of discarded, and Elaine started to look at Tom as like a second father figure, which is, in my opinion, what she should have been looking at him as the entire time. Like, I get that Tom is painted as like a very attractive older man, and that's fine, but I was so weirded out. Anyway, I'm glad that they discarded that storyline, but I just don't know why it had to be in there in the first place. But regardless, Nynaeve and Elaine in their travels go on to join a menagerie and to become performers because they're undercover and they're trying to find safe passage through this land that is, well, not war-torn, but like white cloaks are everywhere, and then they come upon the city where Messima is the prophet for Rand, which is just uncomfortable to me. Like, I thought it was well done, but religious fervor is always uncomfortable to me. When I'm reading about it, I just get like this visceral reaction where I cannot understand religious fervor. I think that that's the reaction that it's supposed to get out of me, so in that sense, I think that it was well done. But it's so uncomfortable. And through all this, Nynaeve and Elaine have been working with Birgitte in the World of Dreams, trying to track down Mogideon, because Nynaeve beat her last time. But when they find her the second time, Mogideon knocks Nynaeve down a peg. And I thought that it was a really interesting dynamic, because I think that Nynaeve is kind of a hypocrite. Well, actually not kind of. I think she's a hypocrite, because her inner monologue is always about how she's right and everyone else is wrong. And she has such a temper. And like, I think that those things make her a compelling character to follow, but I also didn't mind watching her get knocked down a peg as long as she got out of it relatively unscathed. So I kind of liked what that did for her, and I thought that it was interesting. But I also really liked what it set up for later in the book, where Nynaeve encounters Mogideon in the dream world again, but this time she's able to trap her with the idam that Elaine was experimenting with. And I thought that it was very effective, and I really liked that Nynaeve doesn't want to be seen as a coward. I don't necessarily think she's a coward anyway, but she doesn't want to be seen as a coward, so she immediately wants to go help Rand. And Mogideon is really a coward, but she drags Mogideon along, and they do end up being able to help Rand, and then he is able to defeat Ravin with this huge blast of balefire. So I mentioned that before. I thought that that was really interesting, what you can do with balefire, but I was very happy with the way that this book wrapped up. So like I said, I really enjoyed it. I will just quickly mention the third storyline that we had, which was following Min, Swan, and Leanne as they fled across the countryside and tried to find the gathering of Blue Sisters, and then they got into a little bit of trouble, so Gareth Bryan is following them. So, you know, I thought that they were interesting enough to follow because they didn't take up too much page time, and they got some characters where they needed to be, which was to the gathering of Aes Sedai that oppose Elaida in Saladar. So I understand why that was necessary, and I thought it was fine. Like, it wasn't super compelling to me, but I didn't mind it. So overall, again, I gave this book 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. I would say that my favorite people to follow in this book were Mat, Nynaeve, Rand, Moraine, and Avianda. And, you know, there were other people that had interesting things going on too. But I am really looking forward to picking up the 6th book. I can't wait. Please let me know your thoughts on my thoughts down in the comments below. And yeah, I'm really enjoying myself. I'm so happy that I started the journey of the Wheel of Time, and I'm going to continue doing these spoiler talks hopefully for each book. So thank you so much for watching. That's going to be it for this one. Like if you liked the video, subscribe if you want to see more from me, and I hope that you're having a fantastic rest of your day. Bye!